You mentioned on a podcast you did with Film Riot's Ryan Connolly that a lot of times a character will almost kind of like reveal itself to you after a while, that it's almost like you discovered it was a real person, not that you created it. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, I think when you're spending so much time, especially in a documentary situation where you're seeing this person live their life, even as as small of the moments that you have in the context of their whole life, you start to pick up on things, and the character starts to kind of reveal themselves to you as the first audience, and you get all of these different aspects of the character, and as the character is, I feel like as the character is revealing itself to you, you're also starting to identify how this character fits in on the timeline and how they can push the meta narrative of the film forward. And so it's kind of this like two-handed process of letting the character in the film reveal itself to you, and now you can grab hold of what that character is and use them on the timeline to push the narrative, to push the story forward. And so that's kind of how I feel about editing documentaries as a whole. It's a process of discovery and being open to what the film wants itself to be, what the film needs itself to be. And so I feel like it's getting very head in the clouds. But for me, it's, the film will start to take on a life of its own and reveal different things to you, whether it's a tone or a pace or a character. Like this is the utility of this character is kind of becoming manifest at the same time that you're like realizing who the character. And a lot of this happens in two areas. First of all, it happens in the first watch. I take notes a lot with the first watch of like what I'm initially feeling, and then I'll revisit those notes quite frequently as I'm cutting. But then it takes place when you start to put these shots next to each other and like see what this character feels like within this like 3-minute sequence. Like how can we identify this character and what their function is in the film with the individual shots stacked up next to each other. I don't know, it's a very fun process.
Let's suppose, though, I'm either in the film and I'm also the director, or I'm the director and I'm very precious of my quote-unquote subject, for lack of a better term. And I look at the character that's being displayed and I say, that's not really who the person is. But to the viewer, it does seem like that's the person. But the director, or maybe even if the subject has sort of, their hands on the production, says that's not really me. I don't like how I'm being portrayed.
Yeah.
But it really actually may be who they are.
Yeah.
How do you work with that?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, a lot of times the identification and or realization of a character is done in isolation, but also in collaboration, specifically with the director. Like, this is the vibe that I'm getting from this character, and these are the elements that I feel like we can use from the character to push the narrative forward. And obviously we don't want to totally misrepresent them, but there's definitely times in films where it's just like, no, this is actually who you like our character. Like, I don't know, and so you don't want to get at odds. And actually there's a great doc called Subject where they're going back and interviewing subjects of documentaries and like understanding how they were, like, how did you feel you were portrayed in this documentary? It's fascinating. But so for me, it's like having that collaboration with the director, because they were boots on the ground, right? They were like living with these people for X amount of time. So we don't want to misrepresent them, but to not come across too psychotic, we do want to use them to press forward the narrative in a documentary standpoint. And sometimes that's expanding a character, and sometimes that's contracting a character, and like really, because we want to give the viewer the full sense of what the story and this world and this universe is. And so you're never going to explain the entire like highs and lows of this human's existence in 90 minutes. It's just not going to happen. So like, where are they, and what is the utility of this character to press forward the narrative of the film?
Popular thought in writing is to develop character first, and the plot emerges from that character. As an editor, what are your thoughts on that?
For me, in documentary, it depends on the subgenre of the doc. Like, sometimes you're creating a documentary about a world, and then the characters are operating within that world, and you're seeing what these different characters do within that world. Like I would say I cut a documentary on modern day working cowboys, but it was about the universe of the cowboys. And then you had these cowboys that had these character moments within it, but it was more about the universe that was going. But then the other one is a little bit more of that character study, a little bit more of that verite, identifying a character and letting that character dictate to some extent the plot of the film and like where this film is actually going. And so when you're talking about, from an editorial standpoint, when you're talking about more of that character study, that observational, that verite, you do really rely on the character a lot to like take you on that journey and to unfold the plot and the stakes, really, because the character needs to communicate what's at stake for them throughout the process, throughout the film, throughout this time period. It's really the character that tells the audience, like, this is what's meaningful, this is what happens if I don't achieve this, or I do achieve this, or if I fail, all of these different things. And so I'm often looking to the character to lay out what's at stake. And once the character lays out what's at stake, the rest, it falls into place.
How important is a character arc in your work?
It is and it isn't. Again, it comes down to the subgenre of documentary that I'm working on. For some films that are exploring a universe or a culture, if you will, or a time in history, you think like Ken Burns, like how important is a character arc in a Ken Burns doc? Not very, because they're kind of exploring this meta concept. And so those films are really fun to cut, and I love watching those films, and I'm all about them. But then also on the other side, there are some very intimate character studies where arc is everything. And once you start to see a character arc emerge, you get really excited, because it's like, this is the beginning and a middle and an end for this person, whether it's a process of discovery, whether it's a process of this is what I want and this is what happened with my desire. Like, having that arc gets really exciting, and I get really sucked in as a viewer to those character arcs. And so when I do have the opportunity to work in a character genre of documentary, like, character is everything, and it will pull an audience member in so deeply and will pull you into relating to and having empathy for somebody that you would otherwise feel like you maybe wouldn't have empathy for. Not that you would not have empathy, but it's just like, I've never experienced this type of person in my life. And so I'm just like so pulled into who they are and their arc and their journey and where they end up. And so from that end, like, character arc is everything.
Do you think arcs have gotten stronger in some sense? Like you said, Ken Burns, so something that's more like verite or whatever, and maybe it wouldn't hit you over the head the way things now, it almost feels like bigger, faster, stronger. We need to have it just really in your face.
Yeah, I actually think in some ways character arcs have gotten less prominent. I don't know if it's because platforms are not as patient with slower arcing characters, especially in documentary. There's a lot of documentaries about, celebrities and famous people and huge moments in history and things like that. They have a lot of sizzle, and they are really fun to watch. And I think there's a little bit less of an appetite, I think, on the platform from the platform's perspective than from the audience's perspective. But to have those more intimate character arc, I'm going to live with these people or these few people and watch them go on a 90-minute journey of self-realization or discovery, and where the big things happen in very small packages. Like, the boisterous things are very quiet. So for me, I feel like those kind of character study documentaries about not famous people in famous situations are actually kind of getting like pushed to the back burner a little bit and not given as much screen time as this wave of like very poppy and sizzly, for good reason. They're super fun to watch, and I love making things like that, and I love watching things like that. But I think some of those more intimate character studies are kind of getting a little bit neglected at the moment.